The Allen Line Company appreciates all of the dedicated carriers it takes to move loads across the U.S. Stay safe.
OOIDA, representing America's truckers since 1973, presents Landline Now with your host, Mark Redding.
Cargo theft has always been a problem. But over the past few years, that problem has grown considerably. So what's to be done? U.S. Representative David Valadao is offering a solution. He's introduced a bill into Congress that would set up a federal effort to help local officials who are often overwhelmed with the amount of cargo theft going on. I'll speak with the congressman about his bill and what it would do. Some time ago, we told you about Outpost, a company that operates and oversees a network of paid truck parking facilities across the U.S. Greg Akselrod, Chief Technology Officer at Outpost, explains how they're now utilizing artificial intelligence to serve customers. And finally, rates continue to scrape the bottom of the barrel, but Brent Hutto of Truckstop says there are some lanes and markets out there yielding some good returns. But first, the news with Scott Thompson.
Thanks, Mark. Our top story today, the Biden administration is committing $5 billion in grant money toward the restoration, reconstruction, and repair of more than a dozen large bridges across the country. The announcement came on Wednesday. The money coming from the Federal Highway Administration's Competitive Bridge Investment Program. Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg said in a news release that the $5 billion will go toward the repair or replacement of 13 bridges in 16 states. Those include the Oregon DOT getting $1.4 billion to replace two aging vertical lift bridges that carry Interstate 5 over the Columbia River between Portland, Oregon and Vancouver, Washington. The Massachusetts DOT receiving more than $990 million for the Sagamore Bridge Replacement Project in Cape Cod, money that will be used to replace the bridge, and the Alabama DOT getting $550 million for the I-10 Mobile River Bridge Replacement and Bayway Multimodal Project in Mobile. Other states receiving a piece of the $5 billion to fix bridges include Pennsylvania, Tennessee, North and South Carolina, Oklahoma, and Florida, among others. A coalition of states and oil groups is asking the U.S. Supreme Court to hear a case that would strip California's ability to set vehicle emission standards that are stricter than federal standards. Led by Ohio, a group of 17 states recently filed a petition with the Supreme Court asking it to undo a lower court's decision that upheld the Environmental Protection Agency's California waiver. That petition was preceded by another one filed by a group of oil and gas organizations. At the center of the case is California's 2012 Advanced Clean Car Regulation, requiring a certain percentage of zero direct emission vehicle sales by 2025. Because the rule exceeds the federal vehicle emission standards, it required a waiver from the EPA, which the agency granted. But the states and oil groups claim California's exclusive ability to skirt the federal preemption of vehicle emission standards violates the equal sovereignty doctrine of the Constitution, which argues Congress cannot enact laws that are not uniform across all states. The Supreme Court has not yet decided whether to take up the case, but the High Court has been inclined of late to hear cases that deal with the power of regulatory agencies. In its latest term, the 6-3 conservative majority offered rulings that chipped away at the regulatory power those agencies have. 6 months after the Federal Maritime Commission issued a landmark ruling that gave truckers more freedom of choice when selecting a chassis, the agency is looking into claims that ocean carriers are not following the rules. FMC has launched an investigation to determine if the Ocean Carrier Equipment Management Association and its members are complying with the February ruling, which ended the widespread practice of forcing truckers to use certain chassis, which in turn drove up rates. The order applies to 4 regions: Chicago, Los Angeles and Long Beach, Memphis, and Savannah, Georgia. But the Federal Maritime Commission believes some ocean carriers may not be adhering to the cease and desist order, thus the investigation. If the investigation finds evidence of noncompliance, a court injunction could follow, along with civil penalties. Anyone with information that may be useful to the investigation is encouraged to send that information to the Federal Maritime Commission. We've got that information at landlinenow.com. OOIDA Executive Vice President Louis Pugh will be on Capitol Hill next week testifying before a House subcommittee The hearing on Wednesday within the Subcommittee on Highways and Transit is titled Examining the Department of Transportation's Regulatory and Administrative Agenda. While it's uncertain right now what the agenda will entail, possible topics of discussion include DOT proposals for speed limiter and automatic emergency braking system mandates, along with truck parking, autonomous technology, and heavy-duty truck emission standards. Full coverage of Wednesday's hearing and Pew's involvement next week, right here on Landline Now and on our website, landline.media. Cummins is getting $75 million in federal grant money to manufacture zero-emission components and electric powertrain systems. In a news release, the engine manufacturer said the money will be used to convert about 360,000 square feet of existing manufacturing space at its engine plant in Columbus, Indiana. The change will allow Cummins to expand production of battery packs, powertrain systems, and other battery electric vehicle components. Cummins says it's matching the $75 million from the Department of Energy, bringing total investments to $150 million. Tennessee-based carrier Averitt Express is laying off dozens of employees. The announcement came via a Worker Adjustment and Retraining Notification Act notice. In it, Averitt says it's laying off 55 workers, 51 of whom are drivers in West Palm Beach, Florida, on September 1st. That's when a current contract with Costco Wholesale expires. Averitt said it does plan to offer job transfers to all affected employees. The truck driver accused of intentionally driving a semi into a Texas Department of Public Safety building in April has been indicted on several charges. 2 people were killed when Clenard Parker drove a stolen semi-truck into the building in Brenham. KBTX News reports Parker was indicted by a grand jury last week on 2 counts of capital murder, 3 counts of aggravated assault, evading arrest, criminal mischief, and unauthorized use of a motor vehicle. He remains in custody at a Washington County jail. Prosecutors say Parker had been denied a renewal of a commercial driver's license at the DPS office in Brenham 1 day before the incident. The next, they say he stole a truck and led police on a chase that ended with him crashing into the building. The former owner of a Wisconsin-based trucking company has been convicted on wire fraud charges. Federal prosecutors say Robert Carter submitted false information in order to obtain semis for his company, Carter Transportation Group. He also submitted a false wire transfer receipt and falsely claimed he had a multi-million-dollar trust. Carter was convicted Wednesday in federal court following a 2-day trial. He faces up to 20 years in federal prison for each of the 2 counts he was convicted on. Sentencing is scheduled for October. And finally, from urns and elk meat to a circular saw, Denver International Airport has revealed some of the more unusual items to pass through its lost and found of late. Officials at the airport told KMGH-TV that they get around 200 lost and found items each day. Most are mundane, things like bags, glasses, or jewelry, but others are a bit more out of the ordinary. The lost and found is currently holding onto a circular saw and a forklift battery. You never know what you're going to get. A survey of European hotels released earlier this year found some of the most unusual lost and found items left behind in guest rooms included a full clown costume, a glass eye, dentures, and multiple prosthetic limbs. That's Landline Now News for today. I'm Scott Thompson.
Thanks, Scott. A reminder that CVSA's annual Brake Safety Week will take place from August 25th through the 31st. During that week, inspectors across the U.S. and Canada will check all braking systems with a special focus this year on brake linings and pads. For more information, go to cvsa.org. Starting July 26, Marty Ellis and OOIDA's tour truck, The Spirit of the American Trucker, will be at the Top Gun Large Car Shootout. That takes place at the Rantoul National Aviation Center in Rantoul, Illinois. Stop in, say hi to Marty, and join OOIDA for a $10 discount. Next, I'll discuss a bill designed to combat cargo theft with U.S. Representative David Valadao, and we'll find out how artificial intelligence might help truck parking from Greg Akselrod of Outpost. We'll be back in just a moment. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe. If you want more content, go to landline.media to get updated news, information, and archived editions of our show. Once again, that's landline.media.
Capital Reman is your leading source for quality remanufactured engines and components. Capital Reman stands ready to serve all OOIDA members to help reduce costly engine repairs or replacement. Visit capitalreman.com today and use code OOIDA10 to save.
ULSD is hurting your engine. Fight back with Howe's Diesel Defender. Get the most powerful cleaning and maximum lubricity to protect and extend the life of your entire system. At a guaranteed increase in fuel economy, and you can't go wrong with Howe's.
Dispatch, I picked up that load of steel, so I'm ready to roll.
Sounds good. Remember, we're getting paid by weight, so make sure to use a CAT scale.
I wouldn't weigh anywhere else.
Forget misaccuracy, weigh your truck on a CAT scale.
It's tested and proven. Burn 2.1% less fuel when you balance all wheel ends with Centromatic. Call 800-523-8473 to get the OOIDA discount.
Cargo theft has always been a problem, but over the past few years, it has grown. And now, a member of Congress is proposing action to deal with it. You're listening to Landline Now, and I'm your host, Mark Reddick. Welcome back to the program. Landline Magazine reported recently that CargoNet, an information-sharing company working with law enforcement and motor carriers to combat cargo theft, describes the problem in 2024 as staggering, and the increase in the activity so far this year as a substantial increase over both the period a year ago and the fourth quarter of 2023. In fact, the company's figures note an estimated total loss in the first quarter of 2024 alone of $154.6 million. That is the scope of the problem. So what's to be done? U.S. Representative David Valadao is offering a solution. He's introduced a bill in Congress that would set up a federal effort to help local officials who are often overwhelmed with the amount of cargo theft going on. I spoke recently with the congressman about his bill and what it would do. You've introduced a bill titled H.R. 8834. The actual name is the Safeguarding Our Supply Chains Act. Let's start with the basic reason you've introduced the bill. What is the overall problem that you're trying to address?
Well, the overall problem we're trying to address is supply chain fraud. And small-time stealing is, or small-time theft is not a huge issue. I mean, it is, but it's not as big of an issue as what we're dealing with right now. And it seems like it's getting to a point where you've got a lot of organized crime behind it, and that's something that we're trying to focus on with this piece of legislation.
I want to talk a little bit about how your bill addresses the problem, and part of that is it would set up a supply chain crime coordination center. What would the function of that center be?
Well, one of the issues that we've dealt with in government a lot of times is sometimes you've got different agencies that aren't talking to one another, and they get a little territorial. And so what we're doing here is we're asking Homeland Security to work in conjunction with the FBI, the U.S. And the U.S. Attorney General to establish this task force. And it's just so that they can communicate with one another, share notes, and make sure that they're working together to address this issue.
It would also set up a task force. And I'm kind of curious here, what would the role be of that task force and how would it differ from what the coordination center would be doing?
Well, the task force, I think, would be the exact spot where they would do all the coordination and they would work together. And so there are dollars associated with this, so they would have the ability to hire folks and put them in a position and dedicate those people to this specific task of going after this type of theft.
In looking at the text of your bill, it was pretty specific in terms of who would be on that task force. Can you give people an idea of maybe just some examples of what type of people you foresee being on this task force?
Well, I don't know if I'm going to be very specific on who the people are, but obviously we want the different departments to have folks in those agencies working together. And it's national organizations that work across state lines, making sure that they have the ability to access information wherever the theft may be within our country.
Now, I want to ask a devil's advocate question here before we go further. This is already a crime, obviously, and there are people in law enforcement already pursuing criminals who operate in this area, primarily at the state and local level. With that in mind, why is there a need for a task force or a coordination center at the federal level if this is being handled locally?
Oh, that's a great question. And that's something that I'll give you an example of something that happened in my district a number of years ago. We had an issue with a large crime organization here working in the Central Valley, and the local law enforcement was dealing with it, but the local law enforcement didn't have the resources at their fingertips to be able to deal with the size of the crime organization they were dealing with. And this is the same type of thing. You've got your local law enforcement, and especially in California, who are already struggling to keep up with the number of crimes that they're dealing with. Now you throw in a nationwide or a large criminal organization who was very well organized. And so it could be a lot for a local law enforcement agency to deal with. And so we're throwing in more weight behind them. And obviously the Homeland Security, FBI, Attorney General, they have more attorneys at their disposal. They have more tools at their disposal. They've got a lot of things that they have the ability to access and use to help assist my local law enforcement in dealing with these types of things. And obviously, if you're a local law enforcement agency, you might not see a connection between something in Central Valley, California, being connected with something in Arkansas, for example. But you want to make sure that we have somewhere where those connections could be made and we could associate those crimes together and prosecute those to the full extent of the existing laws.
You mentioned California a couple of times there, and certainly our listeners are familiar with the fact that that is a hot spot for this type of crime, not only in trucking, which is the main interest we have, but I've seen some pictures and video of what's happened with some trains carrying cargo containers. With that in mind, what are some of the other hotspots across the nation that came to your attention as you were looking into how to create a bill to address the subject?
Well, for me, California is obviously the first and foremost is the one I heard about the most. And this actually, I started hearing about some of these crimes even before I was in elected office. I started hearing about things where you had people creating fake manifests and fake documentation, and trucks would literally roll into some of my processing plants and grab a truckload of pistachios or a truckload of almonds. And those are pretty high value commodities. And they would drive off with literally 25 tons of this product. And this wasn't just some random guy coming up with a piece of paper and a truck. I mean, this is an organized situation. But I assume any location across the country that has a major hub, a major transportation, if it's a port or if it's some sort of trucking hub, they're all going to have this type of situation.
I want to talk about the downstream effects for a moment here. Obviously, the effect on the trucking industry is obvious, but this also has an effect on general consumers. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, obviously, anytime anything is being stolen from either a trucking company or someone who makes the product or transports the product or delivers the product, it's going to have a cost on consumers. And so anytime that we have the ability to prevent as much theft as possible at any level, it's going to help lower the price to consumers. And so this is obviously something that I try to pay as much attention to as possible. I mean, we all see the videos online of people walking into grocery stores, into pharmacies, and into department stores or Apple stores and literally just grabbing things and walking out. We all know that at the end of the day, the consumer is going to pay for those things and something has to be done. And so this bill is very specific to our supply chain because that is right behind the stores. And we all know the importance of trucking. We all know the importance of rail and the ability for them to be able to deliver those products. But the consumer, sadly, ultimately always pays for everything, especially on this front. This one adds a lot of cost to the storefront, and storefronts are added to the price tag.
I noticed you have some co-sponsors on the bill already, and I know we're still early in the process, but what has the reaction been from your fellow lawmakers to the bill?
Members have signed on, and anytime you bring this up, they sign on pretty quickly. This is a very non-controversial piece of legislation. It's very bipartisan. Both my neighbors here in California signed on. Jim Costa, who's a Democrat, Vince Fong, who's a Republican. But then I've got people from Illinois, people from Texas, and other parts of the country signing on. And the more they hear about it, obviously they sign on because it is a very simple bill. It's something that most people are seeing in their districts, and they want to make sure that they're part of the solution on this one.
Does it seem to you that your fellow members of Congress, and not only the people who have co-sponsored, but also other members, does it seem like they're generally aware of the situation involving cargo theft?
I don't know if they're as aware. I think most people notice the stuff that they see on TV. And I have friends in Washington who have literally been inside of like a CS, for example, while it was being robbed. You have members of Congress who have actually been robbed, either one at gunpoint outside of his apartment. You had one that was followed into an elevator and she had to fight off an attacker. So people are very familiar with the type of theft and crime that is going on around the country. But this is one that I don't know many people notice because you don't always have a camera videoing a truck being held at gunpoint or where those rail cars are being broken into, it's not something you always see on a video or some sort of surveillance, and it doesn't get as much attention. So it is something we do have to work on and make sure that more members know about, so we can get some more attention on this and we can push back.
How much money would your bill set aside to help combat cargo theft?
Well, we did two things. We put $2 million in the appropriations bill for fiscal year 2025, but ultimately and there are two different things here. We did one where we put this in an appropriations bill with $2 million, but then we have the authorizing bill, which is the bill we're talking about, where we authorize expenditures of $100 million from 2025 through 2029, so for a total of 5 years.
And I know that you've got the task force and the coordination center in there, but can you be a little bit more specific in terms of how you foresee that money being spent if you get the bill passed?
The money will be spent mostly in hiring people and dedicating those people specific to this task. That's the goal, is to have people dedicated to this specific task of going after this specific crime. We need people dedicated to make sure that this is what they're focused on all the time, 24/7. Just like the people that watch your show or listen to your show, they're 24 hours on the road, moving products, making sure that us as consumers have things at the store to purchase, to feed our families, to clothe our families. And we need law enforcement in the same position 24 hours a day, watching and helping and looking for this type of crime.
Okay. Well, Congressman, that's all I have. Is there anything else about this issue that you think people need to know, or maybe something that I didn't ask about that you think I should have?
Well, the only thing I would ask is that folks, if they have the opportunity who are listening, obviously call their member of Congress, bring this bill to their attention, and ask their representative to at least take a look at it and hopefully sign on to it so we can get this thing signed into law.
Excellent. Congressman, thank you very much for your time.
Anytime. Thanks for having me.
That was Congressman David Valadao of California talking about his bill, H.R. 8834, the Safeguarding Our Supply Chains Act. You can learn more about that bill at the website landline.media. As we mentioned earlier, the issue of cargo theft is not a new one, but the amount of cargo theft going on is. CargoNet, a firm that tracks that problem, notes a 60% increase in the problem between 2022 and 2023. Keith Lewis, the Vice President of Operations at CargoNet, spoke with our own Scott Thompson earlier this year about the scope of the problem, what the numbers are, and what they tell us.
The increase in traditional theft up about 60%, and then fraud is taken off. And we've seen increases in some quarters upwards of 700% on fraud, where they're using some type of deceptive act. And there's a lot of different silos on that, and they sometimes join together to steal freight. And what we're seeing more now is even on traditional cargo theft and pilferages, and especially in the fraud theft area, more targeted commodities. So if you look at the dollar amount of the overall cargo theft has gone up, and the average loss value per theft has gone up. So that tells me that they've targeted those commodities, and we're not seeing them show up here. You know, we do make a lot of recoveries. We're very successful there. Of course, the more you steal, the more chances you have of recoveries, right? So it's like throwing things against the wall. They can't get everything offloaded and out of the country as quick as, they'd like. So there's some opportunities there for recovery. But we're seeing different groups now, a couple of different groups that they've been around for a few years, but they've really perfected the art of fraud and diversion. And that's led to the increase and the targeted commodity of whether it be solar panels, energy drinks, video, virtual reality type games, or other type of commodities, household goods. We've seen a big increase in the vacuum. Believe it or not, the vacuum cleaners have gone skyrocketed. So because of the cost and the new, everybody wants one of those new vacuum cleaners.
That was Keith Lewis of CargoNet. You can learn more about the topic and keep up with the latest news about it at the website landline.media. Again, that website is landline.media. Landline Now will be back in a moment.
Every year, 28 million people are trafficked globally. The Your Roads, Their Freedom campaign seeks to raise awareness in the transport industry. Truck and bus drivers, be vigilant on the roads. If you see something suspicious, text 233-733 or be free.
Truckdown.com. Whenever you have a breakdown, you need Truckdown.com. 24/7 access to 40,000 verified heavy-duty repair vendors nationwide. Less weight, more freight. Truckdown.com.
Firestone tires are for more of everything, with more durability for more miles and more confidence in your fleet. Firestone's tested tires help fleets save with value where it matters most. Learn more at bridgestonenationalfleet.com/4moremiles.
Landline Now, welcome back. Some time ago, we told you about Outpost, the company that operates and oversees a network of paid truck parking facilities across the U.S. Outpost recently received millions of dollars in Series A funding, and the money's already being put to use. Tyson Fisher, associate editor of Landline Magazine, recently spoke with Greg Akselrod, chief technology officer at Outpost, about how they're now utilizing artificial intelligence to serve customers. Let's jump right into it.
Thanks for joining me, Greg.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
It looks like Outpost is throwing new artificial intelligence technology into the whole mix of the truck parking situation. So kind of give me a brief overview of what this new AI technology platform is being launched.
Yeah. So when I joined a year ago, I had the opportunity to talk to our customers from single truck carriers all the way up to enterprise fleets, and about the parking life cycle, which sounds fancy, but really what it means is finding and booking space at the fragmented, thousands of lots around the country, showing up, trying to get in, then keeping tabs on where their equipment is, who is actually driving it in and out, the condition of it, as well as the security of it while it's in the yard, so they can trust that it's going to be there when they come back. And what we found was we were in a unique position because we had this real estate network of yards to build something special from the ground up. That's really not possible if you can't literally bolt things into the ground. And so we designed this technology platform to solve each of those phases. And what it manifests itself in, as you mentioned, a set of cameras, an intercom, an industrial keypad, license plate recognition, basically a technology package at the gate, plus cameras with AI built in on the poles that allows us to operate our network at scale and in a very consistent way.
So let's kind of just walk through this from the user experience here. So the technology includes like this black kiosk at the entrance of the facility, and it's it's kind of similar to some of the kiosks that we see at like storage facilities with the keypad for entrance. But unlike other kiosks, this one's got like 4 different cameras on it. Very futuristic, cool looking. But so it kind of but what I like to talk about are those cameras and the artificial intelligence technology. So one of the things that the cameras do is that it is what's called asset identification. So it kind of looks like Outpost will be able to track specific vehicles. You can talk a little bit about that.
That's right. So when a vehicle approaches a tractor or a tractor with a trailer or personal vehicle, we're using AI to detect, first of all, what is this vehicle that's showing up? We're determining license plate as well as the markings on it. So license plate is great if you're the government, but if you're a fleet manager, you want to know the tractor ID and the trailer ID. There's also the US DOT number on there. So we're reading these, we're mapping them, we're determining, did the tractor bobtail in or did it have a trailer with it? And we're also doing damage identification. So we're scanning the exterior of the truck. We're looking for things like missing mud flaps or damage that may have appeared, and we're able to flag that so that fleet managers can literally keep their eyes on their fleet and be proactive about issues.
Yeah. So when it comes to the tracking of the vehicle numbers, I mean, this is I'm assuming this is to ensure that the person that is using the access code that you were given is driving the tractor that they're supposed to be driving and hauling the trailer that they're supposed to be driving. So is this kind of a way for not just for the fleet owner to keep track of his vehicle, but as a way, as kind of a time-stamped proof to the shippers and receivers that this is where your shipment is, this is the vehicle, and look, we have camera proof. This is where it's at now.
That's exactly right. There's a lot of different reasons that you want to have eyes on the equipment. One of them is so you have that truth of it actually showed up. It wasn't falsified, or maybe, I was running late, but let me just mark it as 9 a.m. or whatever. It also gives them the ability to instantly know this trailer, maybe if it's a relay, for example, this trailer showed up, it was in exactly this condition, and it was delivered by the carrier that I booked to bring it, and it wasn't double brokered or something like that. And they can just log in on outpost.us to see all of that information, both in tabular form as well as literally the imagery, the video and pictures.
You kind of touched on this briefly, but I want to get to more specifics about this, which is the damage detection with these cameras. And so this is something that it's new to me, at least. I haven't seen it in any other trucking yard. So in addition to capturing the numbers of the vehicles, it looks like this AI technology is also able to detect whether or not there's visible damage to either the tractor or the trailer. So, I mean, what kind of prompted that feature, and how exactly does that work?
Yeah, this is made possible by the developments in large language models that ChatGPT uses. It's same thing that you would chat with can also process imagery. And so we've customized these models to detect for our use case what we are looking for, and to flag things that, we don't necessarily have a whole bunch of images to teach it about trucks and about all the different types of damage that might occur and the difference between a sleeper cab. But we can leverage both what these models already know with our custom application of them to look at them and inform, output what we need so that we can automate a lot of these things that used to take a person at the guard shack.
Sure. So when a vehicle comes in, let's say, the picture that you guys provided us was that there was, a big, basically crack or dent on a top of a tractor. When the truck moves into the facility, the camera's able to just spot that, right? And so kind of get into the weeds of that technology a little bit. You kind of mentioned how the technology is able to detect these things based on certain modeling and what's available to you. Now, is this the type of AI that kind of has a machine learning algorithm to where over time it gets more refined based on the data that comes through, or kind of how does that? I'm kind of just curious on how that camera technology works.
That's exactly right. So we have a variety of 4K sensors on the pedestal facing in all directions, and we're using our own algorithms to determine when is the right time to take that snapshot of it and feed it into the machine learning, into the AI. And because we serve all types of trucks, all types of equipment, all types of fleets, we have this incredible amount of data from every time vehicle passes in or out of our yards. And so all of that data is constantly being saved, and it allows us to make this better than you could possibly make it if you were training on, let's say, a single private yard.
Sure. So yeah, individually, these are all really cool features, but it kind of looks like that all this information is being collected and included in essentially a report once a truck arrives at the facility. So kind of talk about that, because that kind of looks like that from the way that I see it is you have a truck, it enters the facility, and then it looks like you can find out all the information we just talked about is included. What does that include?
Yeah. So a driver pulls up, they're going to enter an access code which identifies under which account they're entering. Sometimes we have carriers that haul for multiple of our customers, and so we have to know who, for example, they're actually bringing this trailer in for. We then are automatically recognizing the tractor and the trailer, the identifiers on it all, and we're doing that damage detection all in near real time. And so from the portal on outpost.us, they can see all of this information and the imagery. And then we have search functionality and filter functionality, so they can do things like search for if there's damage, or search for a certain trailer and see, okay, this trailer entered here. it had damage when it entered, so that when the next driver came and picked it up and said there was damage, you can determine, for example, was it already there or not.
So it's kind of it'd be beneficial in a way for a lot of these fleets to kind of use the network of Outposts, because if you were to use, let's say, Outposts for a trucking spot at one location, but you don't use Outpost to another one, you're not going to have that visual timestamp as far as the damage is concerned. So it kind of gives you a step-by-step, I guess, visual timestamp proof. And I guess that would be the benefit to using Outpost. Is that pretty much the idea here?
That's right. You think about it, it's a checkpoint. So you don't have to exclusively use Outposts to get a ton of value from it. But by flowing in or out of our yards, you're able to kind of run it through this inspection. You'll know that if it's a loaded trailer, for example, you'll know that Outpost has it. The gates are automatically surveilled. Sorry, the gates and the perimeter is automatically surveilled consistently, and it's going to be secure. And you can access that information. And so, we believe that fleets and individual drivers will choose to use Outposts because of that additional services and functionality. Plus, individual drivers, besides the visibility and the security aspect, it's just so much easier and more confidence inducing to know that when I log in and I book parking and I get an access code, it's instantly provisioned into that pedestal. And when people end their reservations, they're deprovisioned. So I don't have random people with codes floating around just flowing in and out.
You also mentioned that the AI technology can detect intruders in the yard. So what is the technology kind of looking for, and what happens when unusual activity is detected?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So the way that we have it set up is it's looking for people or vehicles that are crossing areas that they shouldn't be. So for example, if we see somebody near or on one of our fences, we set off an internal alarm, and we have a central operations team that reacts to that and intervenes, whether that's calling the authorities or intervening through a loudspeaker that saying, hey, we see you, please step off the property, etc. And it turns out that 95% of the time, just being able to intervene at the moment and at the right spot in the yard is enough to get them to go away. Even if you have, let's say, a person walking around the yard 24/7, you're literally talking about half a mile or a mile of fence line. So they're only hitting an area once every 20 minutes. A lot can be done in that time, and a lot of people can hide in that time.
Usually with technology, and especially newer technology like artificial intelligence, there's a lot of concerns when it comes to privacy, especially when we're talking about the collection of, DOT numbers and license plates, and then, I'm sure, so what is Outpost doing to protect that data, and like, how long are you retaining this information? Like, what's the policy?
Yeah. So the one thing to note is that there's a big difference between just building tech and building it for sort of world scale. I spent years at Microsoft and Amazon, both of which have major government customers. And so everything we do and everything we did had to be compliant. We had to think through, data governance and things like that. So we keep we keep the data through modern security. Everything's encrypted, and it's only available to the customers when they need it, and if they need it. What we don't have is some server under somebody's desk that somebody is putting on BitTorrent or things like that. So we take it very seriously, and we know that our customers' trust is hard to gain, easy to lose, and so we're taking steps throughout the entire stack, hardware and software, to make sure literally our business is security of their assets. The data is one component of it.
Our thanks to Tyson Fisher of Landline Magazine and Greg Akselrod of Outpost. You can find them online at outpost.us. We'll take a quick break, but stay with us. Landline Now returns right after this.
Today's rising costs affect everyone. Replace your harmonic damper with a genuine Vibertech TVD viscous damper to prevent costly repairs and downtime. Keep your money in your pocket and your truck on the road with Vibertech TVD. Recommended replacement at 500,000 miles or 15,000 hours.
Ready to make more money? Use a better load board. For a limited time, get 50% off Truckstop Load Board Pro. Just go to truckstop.com/go and enter promo code READY2024 when you purchase Load Board Pro.
Are you tired of the IRS following you around like a dark cloud? Call 888-557-4020 and get your life back.
Since you started, what you've loved about trucking is the freedom. Heading out on your favorite route, a good driving song, and thinking about truck insurance. Well, maybe not that last one. That's why we're here. At OOIDA, we have a full range of truck insurance products, expert advice, and great customer service, helping you get the right coverage for your operation. Go to OOIDA.com because your job is to drive. Our job is to help with everything else.
Landline Now, welcome back. If you're hauling freight and running your own business, you need to keep track of some basic facts and figures that can determine whether you succeed or fail. And that includes finding the freight and how much money you can make hauling it. Today, Landline Now's Scott Thompson will bring us some of that information and get some insight as to why things are happening with the folks from Truckstop.com. Here's Scott now with a report.
Thanks, Mark. As we welcome in Brent Hutto, Chief Relationship Officer at Truckstop. Brent, how you doing?
Well, I'm doing fantastic today, Scott. Man, I'm just happy to be on the Landline Now. I'm live from Chicago, Illinois. You know, Chicago's the hub of logistics in the United States. So it's always good to come back here and kind of be at the epicenter of how freight moves.
Absolutely. Well, we're happy to have you as always. Let's jump right in here with the general question we always ask you here. How are things looking out there on the spot market?
Well, that is the question everybody wants to know as I talk to anybody in the market on when are we going to see things pivot back? And we've seen some sort of some promise and hope where rates will start to rebound back. Probably a little bit later this summer, they'll start to move up a little bit. Don't get too hopeful. They're just going to move back sort of a little bit more than what's called seasonal, which is good. But the marketplace in general, it has its own ups and downs during holiday swings. And 2 weeks ago, we saw the market kind of go back to its sort of normal pressure, and then it's kind of come back up again. But and so did freight. So freight availability actually went back up to 5% above normal, which is good because when freight's up, normally the rates will start to move. Will start to move over time and that. But this marketplace is not a marketplace that moves quickly. The spot market can and does move quickly, but in general, the transportation market moves fairly slowly and pivots slowly. So rates decreased to about 3 cents over the last couple of weeks, and down to 236. This is overall. Van was about 201. Now, by the way, these are the carrier rates. These are, if you want to know what the broker is, just add about 15% to it. And then the flatbed was 243. Reefer was at 241. And to the carrier. Now, look. Here's the thing. I always want to say to the listeners is those are just the posted rates. Your negotiation strength is very different in every single marketplace. So know the inbound and outbound freight in that market because that's so important because these are just like the rates that are public to a marketplace. And so you can always negotiate a better rate for yourself. And if you've got good relationships, you can end up with much better rates just in general. Right. So that's kind of where, and I say that because a lot of times people look at what's kind of the public numbers out there, Scott, and they go, "Oh gosh, that's so difficult." But it really is. Every marketplace is different. Every lane is different, and it's just really important to know those numbers.
Well, and you raise a good point there because, as you mentioned, it's different depending on where you are. We're always looking for hot spots, hot lanes, whatever you want to call them here. They're always out there if you know where to look. And you are able to strike while the iron is hot, so to speak, if I can get that out. What regions or lanes are catching your eye right now?
Yeah, for sure. Well, nationally, obviously, with freight load availability going up, we had an increase in freight. So some of the bigger places of increase in freight are South Central and then Southeast, kind of where I live down in the South, was increased, believe it or not, week to week, 60%. It went up about 60% availability. So that's really good from a rate standpoint. The overall you saw increases in the Mountain Central region. You saw increases South Central. And but kind of the rates even though they went down, what you do is you look at the overall sort of functionality in that. And then some of the areas of the country, because I always say, freight is local. It's where you're hauling and how you're hauling. There's some great in van. We saw great rates last week out of Las Vegas. out of Fort Worth. As I've mentioned over the last many months, Texas has been the hottest marketplace in general, mostly because of the freight coming out of Mexico and moving into the United States, and Mexico being our biggest trading partner now. So if you're struggling in rates, look in Texas. I can tell you that, because flatbed, you even got a bunch of Texas movements out of it, Laredo, and then there's a bunch of good freight that was out of Phoenix. So and there's been a lot of good freight out of Phoenix moving in the last couple of months as well. Those are good lanes in markets. So again, even in reefer, you got Houston, El Paso are the top four, and so those are the kind of areas you want to look at. And that's why I just say go back and really know kind of what's going on in the season that we're in, because you can find really profitable freight out there.
And you brought up a good point earlier, and I think we should probably emphasize it, because folks out there know this, I think, for the most part, but your negotiating power as a carrier really can make the difference between a profitable load and a non-profitable load. And when you're talking with these folks out there and making sure that you're getting the right load, that really is important. And I know that's something you stress over and over again. And it kind of goes to what you were saying there with, people waiting for all these signs to kind of, things to pick back up and the market to come back to a place where we're all kind of happy about it. In the meantime, that really is important to make sure that you're having those conversations with those folks out there, right?
For sure, yeah. No, look, trucking is relational. The world is relational, humans are relational, and trucking is super relational. The better you know somebody, the faster you can get the information communicated back and forth, the more trusted you are. Look, that usually ends up with better profitability just in general. So I tell every owner-operator the best thing you can do is create those relationships. So look, you run your independent business, so it's up to you. Nobody can be more functional. Nobody can change their operating ratio quicker than a one or two truck owner-operator, because you can pivot very quickly. Somebody who has 500 trucks cannot. And and you can change markets as well. So always important to be able to have that flexibility.
Yeah, we know, we've been talking about it for, it feels like years or maybe even decades at this point, about the market conditions and them being tough out there. They have been for quite a while now, which means that folks do have to approach things a bit differently, maybe a bit more smartly as well. In terms of owner-operators and specifically, you're always looking at all the conditions out there that are swirling around. Is there anything on the horizon right now that you're looking at that people should be aware of? Anything of interest that sticks out to you?
Yeah, well, a couple things. We always have to pay attention to regulations, and obviously our federal government is the one that puts our regulations in place, even though with the Chevron Act being kind of looking at. And by the way, if you don't know what the Chevron Act, if you're an owner-operator, go look at it. Yep. It basically puts, it takes away the non-elected official premise in the government and says, okay, well, these groups need to be elected in order to govern us. That's one thing. The other thing is just look at regulations. What's going on with the drug and alcohol clearing warehouse, because that's taken a couple 100,000 truckers out of the marketplace of a 3.7 million truckers out there. So it's important to pay attention to regulations, because those are really the things that make the market go up and down that are trucking related. And so that's important to look at that. And all the markets, Scott, they change. They'll change. What I mean by markets is trucking is 10 to 11% of the overall U.S. economy. It's huge. It's one of the biggest players in there. So the government, what the government does affects it. And so you just think about, like, for instance, even with all the crazy stuff that went on this weekend with the attempted assassination of former President Trump, just the idea that he might become the president changed the actual financial markets. The dollar and U.S. stock futures rose at the idea that a more conservative president might come into the office. Now, look, I'm not espousing one way or the other on politics. I'm just saying that you see things change. And one of the other big things out there that you want to look at is that with a lot of freight, and I'll kind of stop on this one, with all the fraud issues that have been out there. There was passed that the Transportation, Housing, and Urban Development groups for their fiscal year of 2025 had issued a mandate that their groups, through the FBI, the Department of Justice, Department of Homeland Security, and other relevant stakeholders, look into this fraud thing. So they've actually made it a requirement of the 2025 view. Now, look, that's next year. We live in today, so make sure you're checking all the P's and Q's on the freight. Make sure you're making that extra phone call. If it smells funny, it probably is. Make sure you protect yourself, and then use great data sources in order to get your access to freight. But that's kind of what's going on in the overall market. And as with everything in trucking, it's always interesting.
Yes, it is. Always interesting, always something going on, Brent. And we Appreciate you stopping by, as always, to fill us in on all the latest. We appreciate it. We'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks, Scott. Appreciate you guys at Landline. Thanks a lot. See you.
Our thanks to Brent Hutto of Truckstop. You can check out all they have to offer at truckstop.com. We'll leave it there for now. Mark, back to you.
Thanks, Scott. That's our program for today. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe. If you want more content, go to landline.media to get updated news, information, and archived editions of our show. Once again, that's landline.media.
Penske owns and operates some of the best-maintained vehicles on the planet. Our used trucks come with a 5-year maintenance report and pre-sale inspection. So if you're in the market for a top-quality pre-owned truck, look no further. Search our inventory today at PenskeUsedTrucks.com.
Control your toll costs and eliminate tolling headaches with Prepass Tolls. Prepass Tolls means toll volume discounts. Just one invoice for all tolls and fewer violations. Call 877-878-5970 or go to Prepass.com.
I'm a dad,
a son,
a husband,
wife.
I'm a writer,
photographer.
I farm.
I'm a veteran.
I love old cars, fishing,
my kids,
chrome,
and I am
a professional truck driver.
And together we are OOIDA.
OOIDA was founded by truckers to stand up and speak on behalf of truckers. We've done that by combining the individual voices of our members into a single, powerful voice. Protecting your interests, defending your rights.
Join us!
Make your voice heard. Join OOIDA, the Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association. Call 1-800-444-5791 or visit OOIDA.com.